The hardest thing for me to accept was that I inherited something broken, and now it's my responsibility to fix it. As much as I love what I do and what I'm building, as much as I love my vision, for a long time, and maybe not as much now, but it grieves me. In short, it grieves me. Not many people know what it's like to not just be destined to originate something and birth something from your own womb, but to also consent to being accountable to that vision. Not many people become aware to the grief and the pain that it is to be given a vision to begin with that you only received because someone else was just a narcissist and selfish and greedy. As much as I love what I do, and I'm sure as much as you love what you do, there is this bit of heaviness that plagues you, that you notice, that sits on your chest as you're working, as you're networking and building and taking those risks and facing these consequences. It's heavy, it's thankless, and a lot of times it's very lonely. So let's talk about it. Hi, Anami Olatayo, the Brand Priestess, and I awaken founders and high-ranked leaders to their governance. Here we talk about new Earth infrastructure and realm level system architecture. If this video aligns with you and activates you, I invite you to click the link in the description down below to download my free audio transmission titled From Leadership to Governance, Recognizing Your Unclaimed Jurisdiction. That is your first step towards operating within your full governance jurisdiction to materialize your vision. The new Earth only exists because the present one is unsustainable. And that was a truth that took me a while to come into acceptance of, because it feels good to be chosen. It feels good to have a vision that is new and fresh. But when you really think about it, it only exists because the present one is unsustainable. And it's unsustainable because of people's narcissism, their greed, their envy, their powerless, their control. And so really that's the reason why we were born. This is why you haven't been able to compress your vision into something normal, like, I don't know, a hair care brand, like a degree. You know what I mean? Not that those things aren't included in the vision, but just those things. It's always something more. It's always something more collective, more generational, you know? And so us, the new Earth builders, the unprecedented leaders, the governors, have been tasked to build and rebuild. And like I've been alluding to, it's not fair. It's not fair. And the visions that I have for this world, the visions that you have for maybe even just your own family, for just generations later, the collective, we will not be living in that world. Maybe if you come back, if you believe that, but most of us likely will not be living in that world. And so the unfairness can really be unfair because it leaves us exposed and actively traumatized because the structures that we are carrying that could hold us doesn't exist right now. And so in a lot of ways, we've been suffering and living in the consequences of not having that kind of containment for ourselves. We're suffering and going through so much because the people before us couldn't finish or refused to finish, but a lot of them, they didn't get to finish yet. Maybe they did their contribution, but a lot have been taken off of their path for sure. When you're chosen to build and rebuild, the vision you carry comes with collective systemic grief. That's what the heaviness is. Oftentimes, you yourself are a victim of the very systems and structures that you're meant to reform. And out of that pain, that vision is revealed. I know for me, I can't think of any vision in my multi-venture vision that was not directly related to some kind of pain I went through. And even then, as you grow, you also receive secondhand knowledge of how others are being failed. You begin witnessing these things too. So on top of what you've gone through firsthand, you're also watching things secondhand. And that lives in your body, your mind, your womb, and your heart. Most people, though, they remain victims to this. It's like they never become more than what they went through. Because how could you? It is not easy. It's not easy. Like, I think of a lot of celebrities and they may have made it out alive, but they're so traumatized and not free. They're not free. They're so trapped and restricted. I think about kids who've gone through like deep childhood abuse. And I was one of those children, and I see it as a miracle every single day that I'm even here. So many kids didn't grow up with that option, you know? So most become victims, and there are those who become victors. But then there are even fewer who know how to consolidate that trauma and transmute that grief into impact, infrastructures, and realms and domains. So many of us have inherited grief from family systems, religious institutions, academic institutions, just society we live in, the government. And we carry it in our body every single day. And then people like you, who have been doing the work, who have been given the instructions to build infrastructure in replacement of those things, again, that's still in your body, but what you're doing is, like I said, transmuting that grief. You're reversing the outcome that's produced by that engine. And that is a high level, very big task. And it is a lot. And I don't think people give enough credit for someone to take time out of their life and their stability to think about the collective in that way and what that means to hold that kind of grief, to even understand what needs to be built. This is why your vision grieves you, essentially. I guess outside of everything we've mentioned, you're carrying that grief. It has to go somewhere. Think of it like, let's say, the archetype of the black sheep or the chosen one in the family, right? It's always that one person who kind of becomes the scapegoat. They absorb the family's pain, trauma, unresolved issues into their body, and they resolve it. Sometimes they have to resolve things that happened generations ago. It wasn't theirs. And instead of passing it on to their kids, they hold it. Usually people get away with these things because they can just pass it on and they have no qualms about that. They just pass it on to their kids, to the kids' kids, everything, to somebody else, somebody else's kids, somebody else's somebody, whatever. But that scapegoat holds it and they die, essentially. Except what's reborn is a new bloodline, a new standard, a new governing system for their bloodline. That's what new earth builders and governors and originators do. You're holding all the grief and the pain that was caused by the very systems that you're contending. I need you to understand that this is high level, energetic, and spiritual work. If it was hard to do it as a black sheep, imagine what you're up against now. Not up against, but the responsibility, the weight. And I say that because we always talk about vision. We always talk about purpose and what God's telling us to do. We talk about vibrating high enough so the earth can, whatever the buzzword is. And we don't talk about consequence enough. Because if I had known the consequences of saying yes to what I'm building, I wouldn't have said yes for a long time. I remember growing up in church, people would say things like, if you knew the path and the journey and what it would be like, you wouldn't have taken it. And again, that just goes into the, like, my issue with church and rape culture. But the thing is, materialization requires consent. Do you know what you're consenting to? And the thing is, you think you can just override yourself. Your nervous system knows what the stakes are. Even if you can't mentally articulate it or understand it, Your body is bracing, you're resisting, you're struggling, all this. Yeah, because you're recognizing the consequences of those things. So have you reconciled the cost of the consequence? And have you even been able to settle and rectify that grief? It's a lot. Depending on where you are, you might be someone who is just a few years into receiving this vision and you're still ideating and building, or you might be someone who has been in the game for a long time. You're dealing with real life risks and consequences and everything, and leadership and power, all the things. And maybe you're there and you're like, you just can't fully confront what this is because you just can't. I just implore all of you, whatever spectrum you're at, to just give yourself that credit, to be compassionate and patient with yourself, but also make sure that you're fully transmuting, completing that cycle, and fully releasing that grief. It's not yours to carry. Even Jesus rose from the dead. You know what I mean? This isn't a story of martyrdom. I'm not saying that you're supposed to take on the grief and feel, no. It's just by its nature. You're going to be studying the history. You're going to be bumping up against the confinements of the realms that you're trying to reform, the systems you're trying to reform. You're going to witness people and see them at the mercy of these things that you want to change, and that's heartbreaking. That's hard. You carry that grief, especially if you're energetically sensitive, if you're an empath. I don't really like using that word anymore, but you know what I'm trying to say. You have to release it. It's not yours to carry. The awareness is for you to understand so that you can build accordingly and accommodate people accordingly, but you have to release that. You are building the world that my kids are going to live in, that your kids are going to live in, their great grandkids are going to live in. All of that exists within you right now, in your womb. So honor that grief. Let it burn, but don't let it consume you. Integrate. Feel it, acknowledge it, and let it go. It's very possible to be taken out of the intensity, be taken out by the intensity of your vision. We think that we can just throw ourselves into very consequential spaces of execution and face no backlash because God sent us or because we're just love and light. That's not how it works. Your capacity has to match your assignment. Your capacity has to match your assignment, not just materially, but in your interior, because your vision can definitely take you out. And a lot of people have. I like using Hollywood as an example because we see it all the time. There are so many casualties. I also know in academia, especially in higher education, higher education, a lot of people are maybe not the kind of collapse that you see in certain industries, but there's a lot going on too. Most of us just ignore it, but some of us you can't because what you're doing is so big. Make sure you accommodate that. Don't let that fire overwhelm you and burn you. Let it burn and transmute it. If you have already created and are executing your new Earth infrastructure frameworks, plans, manifesto, or building an organization, I invite you to book a new Earth Infrastructure Audit with me. In that audit, we'll be able to test the validity of your structure, the structural integrity, the foundational logic, and if it can hold reality long term. The link for that is in my description box. And in response to what you received from me today, I also invite you to respond with an offering, what I like to call the altar of resonance and response, which is also linked in my description down below. And I just thank you for watching. If you would like to hear more from me, click the bell and the subscription button so you'll be notified. I post regularly, so I would like to see you again. Thank you for stopping by. Bye.